Good evening and welcome to the 12th edition of ALFILM, our home edition as we call it this year. My name is Rabih Khoury and I'm a programmer for the festival. And I have the privilege to host this talk tonight with Saudi filmmaker Shahad Ameen on her feature debut Scales, which is part of our program. It's a double presentation in the program because we're presenting it in our official selection, but also we're presenting it in our Spotlight program, which is dedicated to genre cinema in modern Arab cinema. Shahad Ameen is a writer, director, and she's born and raised in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, and I believe she lives there. She obtained a bachelor degree in video production and film studies from the University of West London and also has a degree in screenwriting. She has directed several short films which have toured, but also her short I and Mermaid in 2013 really made a splash and won several awards after premiering in Dubai. Her feature film Scales, Sayyidat al-Bahr, premiered at the Critics Week of the 2019 Venice Film Festival, winning its first award there before winning several other awards, including the Bronze Tanit in Qatar and the Best Asian Feature in Singapore. Scales is set in a dystopian landscape. It's the story of Hayat, this young, strong-willed girl who lives in a fishing village governed by a dark tradition in which every family must give one daughter to the sea creatures who inhabit the waters nearby. And in turn, the sea creatures are hunted by the men of the village. Hayat has been saved from this fate by her father. And now that she's 13, she's looking to find her own place in the village. And her own place is not necessarily wanting to work on extracting salt as the other women in the village. Shahad, I would like first to welcome you. Thank you for being with us and thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's been a journey, I think, with your film. I mean, you had a physical premiere. You also managed to go to festivals physically. Now that the world is online, it's something else. But nevertheless, we're very privileged to have you with us. I will start directly with you. I mentioned that you made this short film called I and Mermaid, actually, in 2013. So you already ventured a bit into the waters and in the world of sea creatures with your previous short, and it was actually the story of this young girl Hanan who wants to join her father on his fishing trips. Is Scales actually an evolution of the short, or what inspired you to go to this journey on Scales?
I mean, to be honest, I think for me, one of the most exciting things that happened to me ever, that I had like a brief moment where I thought, what would happen if we chop a mermaid in half on on screen? I think that kind of like, just a visual of something kind of brought upon a lot of things. And I always say I never thought of myself as a storyteller who will tell stories about mermaids. I never thought I will write a story about mermaid. Most of the stories I explored at that time in my life was mostly, drama, present day drama. Maybe the last short had a bit of magic in it, but I've never, ventured into the idea of, magical realism or something with a bit of fantasy. But then when Iron Mermaid came to be, when I thought of that idea, when I thought how symbolic this idea can be if I treat it in my way, if I treat it within my community, within my society. And that opened a lot of, doors for me. So when I did Iron Mermaid, I felt when I did Iron Mermaid, I knew I was doing something that was unique and that hasn't been done before, and I was really happy with it. But at the same time, I was frustrated because I felt there was a great kind of missed opportunity there. Because in the short film, Basuma, actually the same actress, she was much younger in Iron Mermaid, but she plays also the main character. So in the short film, it's the story of this little girl who's the daughter of a fisherman, and she witnesses her father killing this creature that looks like her, and it changes her entire view of her father. and it was a very simple small story, and I really enjoyed doing it. But then when I finished it, I knew I wanted to make a feature out of it, because I was like, oh shit, that was a great opportunity for me to explore, the symbolism of the mermaid, within, a woman's body, a woman's
Mhm,
changing body. And I was like, oh damn it, what if Hayat does that? What if, because in a way, to be honest, it's so amazing how in a way I was exploring my own story as I was writing scales. I was like, oh, maybe I feel bad about this, because it was a lot of scales. I know it sounds, crazy, because of mermaid stuff, but a lot of it actually, is, inspired by things I feel I felt,
mhm,
in
mhm.
growing up in Saudi. I
Yeah.
felt these things. So one of my big things is, um, one of the big things for me, is that, I was a tomboy.
Yeah.
I never enjoyed being a girl. I really disliked it. I disliked girls. I was like, girls, and their attitude to it. So it was up till I, grew up and I was writing skills, that I understood it's not that I dislike girls or I dislike being a girl. It's that society made me dislike girls, not just Arab
Mhm,
society, not just Saudi society, but society in general. Look at
mhm.
every story. Most of the people who are doing all the great adventures are boys. It's everything that is fun, it's attached to, men and the patriarchy. So for me, for me in scales, forget everything else, forget the mermaid, forget the fantasy. The most important story in scales is Hayat coming to terms with her body,
Mhm,
is Hayat understanding her body, accepting it, or even though society told her this body is forbidden, this is haram,
yeah.
your whole existence is forbidden. So it's her coming to term with, no, accepting this body that they've taught her to hate all this time and to fear, because they fear it. So for me, that was the essence of the story of
Yeah.
Scales. It
Yeah.
was, a girl accepting, the body that she was born into.
It's really funny how you end that, because my next question is, we mentioned Hanan in I and Mermaid, and I wanted to talk to you about Hayat. And
Mm.
let's just say, for our audience who do not speak Arabic, actually, I find it very interesting as a symbolism, because Hayat means life. And this girl should have been actually thrown away to the sea, and you decide to name her Hayat. I wanted to ask you, because also you mentioned similarities with your own self growing up as a young woman. What does Hayat represent to you, actually? Who is Hayat for you?
Um, Definitely Hayat. It's a lot of people I've met along the way, and a lot of girls. She's not just one person. It's not just, my story. I feel it's the story of most girls. I feel it's the story of, it's a full circle, that Hayat takes. And it was so funny, because what is Hanan in English? Because I wouldn't know Hanan what does it mean?
Hanan is like affection. I think affection is the closest I can put to the word
So for
Hanan.
me, like when I came up with the, Iron Mermaid, I was like, this girl is, because it was, at the beginning, it was a bit of fairy tale. So I wanted the girl to be looking for love. So I named her, Hanan. And then after I finished Iron Mermaid, I was like, no, 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 shit. I don't want her to be looking for love. I want her to be looking for life.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
think
yeah.
that's when, the Hayat character came to be. It wasn't about, finding love, but it was about, finding, life. And that's how, Hayat came to be.
Okay, interesting. And you mentioned already in what you said, that we're dealing with a fable, actually. And this year, because of our program, we have a spotlight on genre filmmaking. We have been discussing for the past couple of days with other filmmakers as well, working with science fiction, working with vampires. In your case, you're dealing with a fable, and
Mm.
you're talking about mermaids. So basically, you're also playing with the codes of filmmaking as well, and you address so many topics, including patriarchy. Why did you decide to, in the end, do it as a fable? Do you think it's easier, or was it more interesting for you to address this as a fable as opposed to do something more conventional, like what you mentioned in your previous or earlier shorts?
Yeah, I mean, I could have told the normal story. I could have, one of my worries when I was writing this, when I was like much younger, and I was writing it through like script consultants and film labs and stuff. So I would, tell some of my instructors that It's like, yeah, I don't think anyone would watch this. I think the only attraction, for me as a Saudi filmmaker is that I'm a Saudi filmmaker. So if I do something outside of the Saudi Arabia, within, a Fable format like I did, it's like, who's gonna watch it? No one's gonna care. And I didn't do something with only Saudi cast, so my cast was more kind of from all over the Arab world. And so I was like, so it loses, I lose, all of what's, cool and interesting about me if I don't set it in Saudi. But then I was like, whatever, I don't care about, appealing to people. I'll just do it my way. And for me, I think for me, one of the most important things was to tell a very visceral story. I didn't want to tell a story. I didn't want it to be told. I wanted it to be seen. And I think if I had set it in, Jeddah or in the suburbs of some village in Saudi, it would have been about, this girl overcoming adversity and this girl overcoming her society. I didn't want that. The story was never about a girl up against society or a girl up against an enemy. The story was always about Hayat up against herself. And, setting it in that world, setting it in a world where, the main concept in the film is this girl, her body, her own body is rebelling against her, you know, that was going to give me the power to tell a story that is very visceral. And for me, that was the most important. I wanted, what excites me most about cinema is, a cinema that wants to be immersive, that wants to immerse the audience in its world. And for me, that was the most important part in Scales. It was being immersed in Hayat's journey, feeling her feelings, even seeing her body changing in front of you. So if I had set it in any other world, in a world that is not as visual, as symbolic as the one I set it in, I don't think it would have been, it would have worked, because it was always, the main story was always going to be Hayat and herself.
It's very interesting what you say, because it feels like Hayat is on so many fights in the film. The first one is, of course, with her own body, with her own self, with understanding who she is and what she stands for and who she wants to be. But also there is the societal pressure, the patriarchy in which she lives, what is expected of women in that society. They should be the ones who are working on the salt mines and stuff like that. But also maybe it's not something for her and she doesn't want to do that. How did you manage to integrate the whole societal complexity in the writing of your film? Was it based on the things that you have lived, or were you really taken by, this is a fable, I can do whatever I want? How much was it what you've lived through?
And very interesting question. For sure, in the writing process, I was always trying, just for me, I was always trying to ground it back to something I have felt or something I have seen within present day society. So it was always, symbolic for something that exists in present day society. But as for the world, I mean, I think for me, one of the most important things that I kept communicating to the people who worked on Scales and the producers who worked on it is I wasn't telling a fantasy, It was never going to be a Hollywood fantasy movie. It was never going to be, I wanted to avoid actually all the cliches of explaining the world of, and I'll go back to the point I said earlier, the building of the world was important just because it was part of Hayat's story. For me, what was more important was building the immersive journey that I take you through with Hayat, So all of these, like explaining the world and setting up the world of this village, for me, it was secondary to Hayat's journey and Hayat's story. Because if I had focused on, the magical and the fantasy, I don't think it would have been the film I was, planning on making. I think it would have been just, a fantasy movie, and let's have her go through the exact same journey that any fantasy film has, like the hero's journey, do that, do this, and we're done. No, I wanted something to be completely different and completely original. And I remember even like, when I was following like the hero's journey, I was like, no, I'll have her do the opposite things, I won't have her go through the exact same format that we see a lot of fantasy films go through. And for me, that was when the idea of it being, a magical realist film. So we have the small element of fantasy, but the rest of whatever you see in the film, the rest of the things are very much realistic,
But also, I mean, when we consider that the talk on patriarchy, but also there is at some point there is a reversal in the gender roles, or the roles that we know in a way. She develops a close bond with her mentor on the ship, and in the end, Hayat becomes a real hunter, just like the other guys in the journey, actually. Addressing all of that, I thought, is very interesting, because we get to discover the many layers of Hayat's complexity as a character, but also what she has to deal with and what she has to overcome to deal with, to go where she wants to go, actually. And I was really interested to ask you actually about tackling all of these topics. The realism, actually, while still doing the fable, for me was a very interesting thing, that there are so many real elements at the same time we're looking at the fable. How was it for you once the film was taking shape? How did you feel, as a filmmaker, going through the editing process and looking at the film taking real shape? Do you feel like you embodied the topics that you wanted to put? Do you feel like you served the topics that you wanted to say?
I will say I hope so. I remember when like the film finished, I kept, I love scales and I love everything about it, and it's a film that I made with, my heart and my soul. But I remember I would tell my producers, it doesn't look like anything. What is it? And they're like, it's art house, it's your film. And it was one of my biggest worry, is that it felt like it didn't look like anything. But I remember one of my instructors in film school used to say, normally people, when they make a film, it's like, drawing a face, and most of the time the face will be, the eyes are here, the nose is here, the mouth is here. It's going to be a right face. But a filmmaker can come and say, I don't want, the eyes to be here, I want it to be here. And it's still going to be a face, and it will have all the features, but it's going to be, a weird face. And I like my films to be weird like me, and to have a weird face, and not the exact, kind of face that we all have. So I think that was the most exciting part, in making Scales. I had producers who were so brave, and actors, and people who worked on the film that are so brave, and they all understand the film, believed in it, and believed in what we were trying to tell, how we were trying to take the audience on a journey, on an immersive journey with Hayat. And I think that's what we've accomplished. In telling a story, from the perspective of one character, and going through all the experience that she goes through as a girl, until she accepts being a woman.
It's very interesting, because there are all of these obstacles that Hayat goes through, but the film also has so many positive elements to it. Once we discover Hayat more and more, I mean, empowerment, we can talk about empowerment, we can talk about fighting for one's own rights and own needs, but also the concept of rebirth, I think, is very interesting. When she goes from the sea twice, there is so much hope in the film as well, even though can you tell us a bit about this positivity in all of these?
I love that you're saying that, because I think some people won't see what you're saying. I think Scales is very hopeful, and I think Scales was very, a lot of people think, if it's a feminist movie, then it's going to be against men. I think it's very, I think it gives every, character its justice. And, for me, in Scales, everyone, there was no real antagonist, no real protagonist. And that's the first thing you do. And don't write a script without real antagonist. But there wasn't, and I really didn't want to have an antagonist in this film. I felt it was, it was the world and its circumstances, not any of the characters. So I really hope that people view the film as hopeful. For me, the ending is hopeful, but a lot of people would go and said, no, like, we want to know what happens. I'm like, well, you need more, like, you only need that, bits of, bits of light, throughout the story. And I think, Scales is definitely a very hopeful film.
Yeah, you spoke a bit of light. Let's talk about a bit about the making of the film on a technical level, because there are so many interesting things here to say. The camera work, for instance, is very striking in the film, and I want to ask you first about the location. You really captured that with the camera in a very beautiful way. And I know that you shot in Oman, for instance. What made you go to Oman? Was it a choice from you as a filmmaker? You knew these locations, you wanted to film there, or the story made you want to go there with your team? You were scouting locations and then you decided to go there. What was the...
So we had a couple of, it was always a film set in this, fantasy island. So we could pick and choose, locations. So we did search a couple of locations. We thought for a while to shoot, in Jordan near the Dead Sea, but there isn't really any fishing villages. So we didn't, we abandoned that idea. And then we looked into places in Saudi, such as like Khorasan Island, but it was very hard at that time. It was very hard to get, visas for like people. So Saudi was at that time out of the question. And then and then I was living in Dubai, and I remember seeing, I was like just Googling like old villages in the Arab world, fishing villages in the Arab world, like just Googling like things like this, and then suddenly a village came out that, everyone should literally Google and check, because we couldn't have it in the film, but it exists. So suddenly a village came out like called Kumzar, and it's this literally like little, not island, because it's, because it's, connected to land, but you can only reach it by water because it's so far away from, the mainland. And it's just like this between two valleys, and, just this, but has a bit of new buildings and a bit of all, just a very, surreal, out of this world location. And I was like, oh my God, we have to shoot in Kumzat. And it turned out to be in Oman, which is like 3 hours away from, where I was living in Dubai. So my producer went and checked it out, but he couldn't get to Kumzar, which is, the picture that I found online. But we did get to, the places that you've seen. So the closest places is where we shot. So it was the Khasab village, and it was this gorgeous location. But mainly we wanted to shoot in a further down location, which took like 3 hours by, jet boats. And it was a village called Kumzar that is, we visited, but we haven't shot there, but it's, out of this world incredible. And yeah, we ended up going back and forth to Oman, to Khasab, where we shot for about a year. We connected with the villagers, we connected with the people there, and then we went up there and shot there. And it was just this incredible location that is very new. No other international crew came in or shot before. So, hats off to the incredible, producing team, my incredible line producer who made it possible to shoot in Oman, and to, Omani people who are literally, they were the most helpful, helpful people ever, I don't know if you've ever been to Oman, but like the nicest people, seriously. So it was incredible location to shoot in.
So this is of course was a production decision. Let's talk about the other decision, which I'm sure you get as a question most of the time. The choice of working with black and white. Was it a decision that you thought about right from the beginning, or was it something that you discussed with your DOP? How did you decide to shoot in black and white?
No, whatsoever. We shot the film completely in colors, like colors. We shot the film. We even graded in colors. And then at one point we thought that the film looked very colorful and kind of happy, and no matter what we did, so I go back to the colorist who was coloring, so take the colors away, make it more washed out, and no matter how much we would wash it out, it still has this very beautiful blue of the sea and these very striking rocks. And so it always looked very more happy than I'd want it to be, and at one point, and after we took all the colors, we was like, okay, let's try black and white, maybe it would work. And then I remember we put the black and white, we just tested like the first 5 minutes in black and white, and everyone was like, yes, the film is in black and white, this is. And it was me and the DP who really enjoyed the black and white. And what's so funny about Joao is Joao kept telling me, my DP, Joao kept telling me throughout the shoots, like he thinks in black and white, so he sees things in black and white. And he would show me like pictures, from the captures from the scene in black and white and in colors, and he was so in love with the black and white. And then we switched the film to black and white. And what's so funny is that Joao's feature that he did before mine also was shot in colors, and then it was switched to black and white. So he is definitely a master of black and white.
Was the art direction team happy with that decision?
Listen, I'll tell you who wasn't happy. Some of the editing team wasn't happy. The sound team wasn't. Like, we did our sound and editing and all of that in France. So definitely the French team was the most upset about the switch. He's like, no, we want the colors. They really loved it in colors. And definitely they weren't happy about the black and white.
No, I'm asking about art direction because I'm trying to imagine now what it would have been like to have, the texture of the costumes and the locations in color. Because I mean, this for sure is a complete different thing to see things.
No, definitely. With
seeing
art
the water.
I know that they're happy with the black and white. Yeah.
Yeah, we've been talking about the team, but also let's talk about Basima Hajjar, who plays Hayat. You mentioned her in the beginning. You also mentioned that you worked with her. This now she was a bit older, I assume. How was it to work with her before and after, and how much did she give you actually for Hayat? Which I mean, things that you did not even imagine she would. How much was it her own input as an actress?
Like Basuma and I work together. She's literally like my partner in crime, because I have Nafidat Layla, my short film that I did before Iron Mermaid. She was working on it when I was shooting in Jeddah. She was always in the shoots that I was working on, acting in either commercial here or there. So just when I wrote the script, I know it was for Basim. It was for her, and it was for sure she was gonna act in it. So when I did Iron Mermaid, I knew that I wanted to, I don't think I would have wrote it the same if Basima hadn't come into my life. So for sure the script, when it was written for her. Basuma, just when she has this incredible features, I at one point I remember we were gonna, that gives me anxiety just thinking back to it. At one point, like 2 weeks before shooting, we were gonna lose her. So they were like, okay, Shahad, fine. The producers were like, shoot the first week with her and then we'll throw everything away and we'll recast. And I was like, I was like, how do you want me to go shoot, pretend that everything is like, so everyone's like, no, it's gonna be fine, even if we shoot, we can reshoot, don't worry. Like, because she had exams and her parents didn't want her to miss exam and fail, and the school wasn't cooperating with us, and it was just a horrible 3 weeks. So like the first week of filming, we were filming, but we weren't sure if we were gonna keep Basuma until the last day of shooting. And she was literally like, no matter how much we try and schedule around it, she was in every scene every day. She didn't have days off. So just the fact that I got to keep Basima on set and she got to finish the film with us is just it was incredible. Basuma is, very natural. That was for me, no matter how much we casted all over, no matter if people were acting, I didn't want anyone to be acting Hayat. I wanted someone to be Hayat, and Basuma was being Hayat. She understood who Hayat was. And for me, that was the main part of, just being able to follow Hayat's journey. It's Basima and everything she does, along the way. To be honest, I couldn't imagine, the film without her, or, without, her face looking back at us.
We're slowly reaching the end, but before we do, I have just a couple of last questions, and then also we can see if we have questions from the audience. Tell me a tiny bit about the title, the difference between the English and the Arabic title. I mean, the Arabic title is Sayyidat al-Bahar, which is Lady of the Sea,
Okay.
or I don't know how you translate it to English in
I'll
your
say a
own
bit of
words.
funny things, but in Arabic. So I think but it's so funny that the title in Arabic throughout the years I was making the film was Harash. Okay.
What does it mean?
So Harashif, it means scales,
Okay.
Harashif,
Yeah.
and so
It's a
it was
complete
always
different
Harashif.
wording for us. So I don't, the word I
Okay,
mean,
okay, so it was Harashif, maybe it's Jadawi, Kolakal, Harashif. Okay, so everyone's like, so everyone knew it by Harashif. I went to labs with it by Harashif, and it's like these things that come in. So I remember when after I finished the film, and a lot of people knew about the film Harashif, and they like look, a couple of people came to me and they're like, Shahad, why is it like Harashif is such a bad name? Like it's
yeah.
trying to be something, but it's not really anything, and a lot of people were so upset, they were very offended by the name. So they were like, we don't like, so I was like, okay, let's switch the name. And one of my producers came up with like Sayyidat al-Bahar in Arabic, which is much more poetic and in tone with the film and the story. Harashif was a film that's trying to be cool. It's not trying to be, but then in English it wasn't as nice, like Lady of the Sea or
Mm,
Goddess of the Sea or
mm.
Mistress of the Sea. So we tried all of it, and in English it wasn't nice. So we decided to keep the English title as Scales and switch the Arab title from Harashif, which I really liked, but apparently a lot of people found really offensive to say that al-Bahar.
You also just mentioned your producers, and for me, I find the production aspect of your film very interesting. How the producers came together. I mean, you have producers from Iraq. You also have Rula Nasser,
Yeah,
who's Jordanian,
fantastic.
and also, I mean, you have a UAE production basically.
Mm.
How did you manage to bring this whole team together when it comes to production, actually?
So to be honest, it's I'm gonna have to give that to Imagination, the company that funded the film. So it was amazing having their support, because to be honest, no one else was going to make a film such as this one. I think Imagination was the only company willing and brave enough to take on a film such as this one, and to take on a feminist story such as this one. So I was so they're the one with my producers Paul Miller and Steven Strachan. They put the team together, so they brought Rula Nasser, Mohammed Al-Darraji, and it was just incredible having all of these experienced people working on my film. So as the first time filmmaker, I was very happy to learn from all of their collective experiences.
Shahad, I want to finish on this note with you. Saudi cinema today is really, some people are calling it a boom, some people are calling it, I mean, after the 70s, in which things were happening, now that suddenly there are films, people want to see them, you're going to festivals, but also in the Arab world, these films are touring. In our program also, we're very happy to have the other Saudi film, which is Last Visit by Abdul Muhsin
Oh,
Al-Dab'an. And this is also a feature debut. How do you feel now being part of this emerging generation of artists in Saudi Arabia who are really fearless in tackling so many things and so many topics around the Saudi society?
I mean, to be honest, I think we're being handed this incredible opportunity, and there's incredible focus, and from like the Ministry of Culture Information and the government right now on the arts, and they came to understand the importance of culture and art, the importance of translating our human experiences, and who we are as Saudi. So it's incredible to have these opportunities suddenly come to us, when for years we've shot films in fear, to be honest. And so it's incredible to suddenly have that change. But I think it will all depend on us. It's either and the way we will tell the story, it's either we take advantage of it and tell stories that means something, and that will that will be a record to who we are and our experiences, or we can just make movies that are kind of cool and trying to copy American films, which I really, dislike and discourage. So it's really up to the filmmakers, and I really hope that we take advantage of it and we make the films and tell the stories that need to be told and need to be out there and need to be known for people.
And now, of course, you have this the Red Sea Film Festival in Saudi Arabia, which is also a way to support this emerging community and this emerging set of new talents wanting to tell their stories. I want to finish, Shahad, with the final question. Last year at the Berlinale in 2020, there was a film by a very acclaimed German director, Christian Petzold, who did this film called Undine, which is also a fable, but a modern tale on this woman actually who lives in the sea in a way. We started talking about the sea, and I want to finish this talk with the sea. So many filmmakers are addressing modern tales on the sea. What does the sea represent for you?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I always, because we live near the sea, maybe it was always in my subconscious because I really like the sea and I like staring at it. But it was always in my subconscious, definitely to represent freedom. And definitely, if I can see the sea, there's a way out. you can, there's always a way out when you see the sea, but without it, you're just jailed in. So yeah, definitely freedom.
I would like to thank you so much for being with us. I just hope you can always do films that speak about freedom, but also openness and just getting out of the box and freeing your characters the way you did with Scales. Thank you so much for being with
Thank you
us.
so much for
And
having me.
we're looking forward for what comes after Scales, which I think is a more difficult journey than this one.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you so much. And for our viewers who are watching tonight, I would like to tell you that, of course, Scales is still available in our program until Friday night, but also Last Visit, which is the other Saudi film in the program. Also, a beautiful debut film from Saudi Arabia is available in the program. Tomorrow, we have two talks. The first one is at 5 p.m. German time, and it's a panel on migration that addresses two films of the program. We Are From There and Purple Sea. Also two films that address the sea, by the way. And at 7 p.m. we have a talk on a feature program that we called On Place and Memory with filmmakers Florian Kunert and Milena Dessel. Thank you so much and have a nice evening.
Thank you so much. Bye.